The silence in the Galactic Assembly Chamber broke with a sound that made every delegate freeze. It was a distress call, but not the usual calm request for assistance. This one carried screaming in the background, the sound of explosions, and the desperate voice of someone watching their world die. Ambassador Yuna Lee sat in the human section of the massive chamber, a small area far from the central platform. Earth had only been part of the assembly for 5 years, and most species still kept their distance. Humans came from what the galaxy called a death world, a planet so hostile that surviving there had made them dangerous. Other species looked at humans and saw predators, not friends. The Velarin delegate appeared on the main screen. His blue skin had gone pale and his large eyes were filled with tears. The Velarin were a peaceful aquatic species who had never known war. Now his world was burning. Please, the delegate begged. The Kraith Empire has invaded our system. They are bombing our cities. Millions are already dead. We have no weapons, no military. We need help, anyone, please. The chamber erupted in concerned murmurs, but no one volunteered. The Kraith were known across the galaxy as brutal conquerors. They took worlds and enslaved populations. Fighting them meant risking your own people, your own worlds. Yuna stood up slowly. Every eye in the chamber turned to her. She felt their fear, their judgment. To them, she represented a species that should never have left its violent little planet. Earth will answer the call, she said clearly. The reaction was immediate. Several delegates made sounds of alarm. A tall insectoid ambassador actually moved away from the human section. Absolutely not, declared the assembly chairman, a being made of crystalline structures that hummed when he spoke. Humans are too unpredictable, too violent. You have been members for barely 5 years. We cannot trust you with such a delicate situation. Delicate? Yuna's voice was sharp. Their world is being destroyed. How is that delicate? You call us violent, but you sit here doing nothing while millions die. What does that make you? The chairman's crystals turned a deeper shade of blue, a sign of anger. We must follow proper procedures. There are protocols, diplomatic channels. We will send observers first, then negotiate with the Kraith. The Velarin don't have time for your procedures, Yuna said. She looked directly at the Velarin delegate on the screen. We will come. I promise you. The vote was called. Most delegates voted against human intervention, but enough abstained that Yuna's offer was technically approved. She left the chamber knowing that the assembly expected her people to fail. Some probably hoped they would. Dead humans meant one less Deathworld species to worry about. Captain Hyunwoo Kim received the orders while his ship, the Resilience, was conducting a survey mission near the outer colonies. He was a tall man in his 40s with gray starting to show in his dark hair. He had been a soldier once, back when Earth was still divided into competing nations. Now he commanded an exploration vessel which suited him better. He had seen enough war, but war had found him again. They want us to do what? Engineer Minho Choi looked up from his console, his young face showing disbelief. He was only 26, brilliant with engines and propulsion systems, but he had never been in combat. Fight an empire, Hyunwoo said simply, or at least try to save whoever we can before they're all dead. Dr. Ji-won Park, the ship's medical officer, stood with her arms crossed. She was in her 30s, skilled and compassionate, the kind of person who had become a doctor to help people. How many ships do we have? Ours plus 5 military vessels, Hyunwoo said. Against a fleet that numbers in the hundreds. The bridge was silent. Everyone knew the math. It was impossible. So we're going to die trying to save people we've never met? Minho said quietly. Hyunwoo looked at his crew. They were afraid. He was afraid. But he also knew something about humans that the rest of the galaxy didn't understand. Humans didn't give up. Their entire history was about facing impossible odds and surviving anyway. Earth itself had tried to kill them for millions of years with ice ages, plagues, predators, and natural disasters. Humanity's response had been to thrive. Maybe, Hyunwoo said, but maybe we surprise everyone. Maybe we surprise ourselves. The fleet gathered at Earth's orbital stations, 6 ships against an empire. Admiral Seojin Kang commanded the military vessels from his flagship. He was older than Hyunwoo, a veteran of every conflict Earth had seen in the past 30 years. His face was weathered, his eyes hard. He knew what they were flying into. The Kraith fight like most galactic species, Seojin told the assembled captains via video link. Long-range calculated, trying to minimize their own losses. They've never faced anyone who fights like us. "And how do we fight?" asked Lieutenant Daeun Song, the youngest fighter pilot in the fleet. She was brilliant and reckless, exactly the kind of pilot they needed. Seojun smiled, but it wasn't a pleasant expression. "Close, fast, and mean. We board their ships. We get inside where their weapons can't be used. We make them afraid." The ships prepared to jump to faster than light speed. Hyunwoo stood on his bridge and thought about Earth. He thought about the blue oceans and green forests, the mountains and deserts. He thought about how beautiful and terrible their world was, and how it had made them strong. "Captain," Jiwon said softly, standing beside him, "do you think we can actually do this?" Hyunwoo looked at the stars ahead. Somewhere out there, people were dying. People who had never hurt anyone, who didn't understand violence, who just wanted to live. "I don't know," he said honestly, "but they called for help. And we're the only ones who answered." The fleet jumped. Space twisted around them as they traveled faster than light itself, racing toward a war that everyone expected them to lose. In the Galactic Assembly, delegates watched and waited for news of humanity's failure. On the Velarin homeworld, cities burned and people prayed for a miracle. What they got was 6 ships full of Deathworlders who had evolved to survive the unsurvivable. What they got was humanity, angry and armed and absolutely refusing to let innocents die. The Kraith Empire was about to learn a hard lesson. They had conquered dozens of worlds, enslaved millions, and never faced real resistance. But they had never fought anyone from Earth. They had never fought anyone who considered impossible odds to be just another Tuesday. The Velarin system appeared on their screens like a vision of hell. Orbital stations burned in the darkness. Debris fields marked where defensive platforms had been destroyed. And below, on the beautiful blue world that reminded Hyunwoo painfully of Earth, cities were dying. "Reading 247 Kraith vessels," reported the sensor officer. Her voice was steady, but her hands shook. "They outnumber us 40-1. Admiral Seojun's face appeared on the main screen from his flagship. The old warrior looked calm, almost relaxed. "They think numbers matter. Let's teach them different." A message came through on the Kraith military frequency. The voice was harsh, filled with amusement. "Attention, human vessels. You are outnumbered and outgunned. Surrender now, and we will make your deaths quick. Resist, and we will take you apart piece by piece." Hyunwoo activated his communication system. "This is Captain Hyunwoo Kim of Earth. We're here for the Velarin. Leave this system now, and we'll let you live." The Kraith commander laughed, a sound like grinding metal. Brave words from a dead man. "Commander Vrax will enjoy breaking you." The channel closed. "Well," Minho said from the engineering station, "at least we tried diplomacy." Hyunwoo allowed himself a small smile. "Connect me to the Velarin." A face appeared on screen, blue-skinned and exhausted. This was Tellerin, leader of the Velarin Council. His large eyes widened when he saw the human captain. "You came," Tellerin whispered. "The assembly said someone would come, but I didn't believe." "You're from Earth? From the Death World?" "We are," Hyunwoo said gently. "And we're here to help. How many people can you evacuate?" Tellerin's face showed confusion. "Evacuate? This is our home. We have nowhere else to go." "Then we fight for your home," Hyunwoo said. "Where are your civilians most vulnerable?" "The coastal cities. They're bombing the shallow waters where our young are kept safe." Tellerin's voice broke. "So many children are already gone." Jiwon stepped forward. "I'm sending down medical teams. We'll save who we can." "But the Kraith," Tellerin said. "There are so many of them. How can 6 ships stand against their fleet?" Hyunwoo looked at the elderly Velarin leader. "You'd be surprised what humans can do when we're angry." The human fleet split up. Admiral Seojun took his 5 military vessels toward the main Kraith fleet. Hyunwoo brought the Resilience into orbit over the largest coastal city, where Jiwon and her medical teams prepared to transport down. "Captain," Minho called out, "the Kraith are launching fighters. 300 of them, heading our way." Lieutenant Daeun Song's voice came through the communication system. She was in her fighter, one of 20 launched from the military vessels. "We've got them, Resilience. Just get those doctors down safely." Hyunwoo watched on his screens as 20 human fighters raced toward 300 Kraith craft. The odds were insane, but Daeun was laughing as she flew, her voice full of excitement. "Come on, you ugly bastards. Let's dance." The Kraith fighters flew in perfect formation, their movements coordinated by computers. They were efficient, calculated, designed to minimize risk. Human fighters had no such concerns. Dune led her squadron through a debris field at speeds that made the Resilience's sensor officer gasp. They wove between burning stations, used destroyed ships as cover, and flew patterns that no sane pilot would attempt. The Kraith tried to follow. 3 of their fighters collided with debris. 5 more got confused in the chaos and fired on each other. Dune's squadron picked them apart, not through superior firepower but through sheer reckless skill. "These pilots are insane," a Kraith commander reported to his superiors. "They fly like they want to die." "No," Commander Vrax watched from his command ship. "They fly like they're already dead and taking us with them." "What kind of species is this?" On the planet's surface, Dr. Jiwan Park transported down with her medical team. The coastal city was in ruins. Buildings had collapsed into the shallow waters. Bodies floated everywhere, and among the destruction, survivors huddled in terror. Jiwan had seen war before, back when Earth's nations still fought each other. But this was different. The Velarin were completely unprepared for violence. They had no concept of it. Adults threw themselves over children, their only form of defense. They had no weapons, no shelters, no plans. "Set up triage here," Jiwan ordered her team. "Save who you can. Priority to the children." A young Velarin male, his arm badly burned, stared at the humans in fear. "You're from the Deathworld. You're the violent ones." Jiwan knelt beside him, her hands gentle as she treated his wound. "Yes, we're from Earth, and yes, we know violence, but we also know how to stop it." She looked up at the sky where explosions marked the battle above. "We're good at stopping it." In orbit, Admiral Seogen was proving just how good humans were at violence. Instead of engaging the Kraith fleet at long range, he did something no galactic species had done in centuries. He rammed his flagship directly into a Kraith destroyer. The collision should have destroyed both ships, but human vessels were built differently, designed to survive atmospheric entry, asteroid impacts, and the general hostility of existing near Earth. The Kraith destroyer crumpled. Seogen's flagship had a massive dent in its bow, but it was still flying. Before the Kraith could recover from their shock, human Marines in powered armor launched from boarding tubes. They punched through the Kraith hull and poured inside. Commander Vrax watched in disbelief as his vessels were boarded. The Kraith were strong, well-armed, and experienced, but they had never fought in close quarters. Galactic warfare happened at a distance. Boarding actions were considered primitive and barbaric. Humans were both primitive and barbaric, and they were very good at it. The human Marines moved through Kraith corridors like predators. They were faster, more aggressive, and completely unafraid of injury. When a Kraith soldier shot a human Marine in the chest, the Marine staggered, then kept coming. The armor had absorbed most of the impact, and the pain only made the human angry. "They don't stop," a panicked Kraith soldier reported. "We shoot them and they keep fighting." "What are they?" "Deathworlders," Vrax whispered. He had heard stories but dismissed them as exaggerations. Now he watched as a single human squad captured one of his destroyers in less than 10 minutes. "They're actually from a Deathworld." Minho worked frantically on the Resilience, his fingers flying across the controls. The Velarin had orbital stations, beautiful structures designed for research and observation. They were useless as weapons. But Minho was an engineer, and engineers saw possibilities. "Captain, I can retrofit these stations. Turn them into defensive platforms. It won't be much, but it might slow the Kraith down." "Do it," Hyunwoo ordered. Minho transported to the nearest station with a team of engineers. They worked while the battle raged around them, cutting through elegant Velarin architecture to install weapons and shields stripped from damaged human vessels. It was ugly, brutal work. They turned art into instruments of war. A Velarin technician watched them work, his expression confused and horrified. "Why do you know how to do this? Why are you so good at destruction?" One of the human engineers looked up, his face tired. "Because our world tried to kill us every single day for millions of years. We learned to fight back. We learned to turn anything into a weapon. We learned to survive." By the end of the first day, the situation had changed. The Kraith still outnumbered the humans significantly, but they had lost 20 ships. 5 had been boarded and captured. 15 had been destroyed by fighters they couldn't catch or orbital platforms that shouldn't exist. On the surface, Dr. Jiwan had saved 300 Velarin civilians. It wasn't enough. Thousands had died, but those 300 were alive because humans had come. Talaran contacted the Resilience, his face showing an emotion the Velarin rarely expressed. Hope. You're actually holding them back, he said in wonder. 6 ships against their fleet and you're winning. We're not winning, Hyunwoo corrected gently. We're surviving. But that's what we do best. The news of humanity's resistance spread across the galaxy faster than light itself. In the Galactic Assembly, delegates watched the battle feeds in stunned silence. 6 human ships were not just surviving against the Kraith fleet. They were actually pushing them back. It was impossible. It was terrifying. It was magnificent. On the 5th day, everything changed. A massive Kraith armada arrived in the system. 200 more ships led by Warlord Kethvar himself. The Kraith Supreme Commander had come personally to crush the humans who dared defy his empire. Private Jiho Nam watched the new ships appear from his position on the Velaran surface. He was young, barely 22, and this was his first real combat. For 5 days he had helped fortify the coastal cities, working alongside Velaran civilians who were still afraid of him. That's a lot of ships, he said quietly. Beside him, a Velaran child named Pella looked up at the sky. She was young enough that her skin still showed patterns of youth, and small enough that she barely reached Jiho's waist. For 5 days she had followed the human marine everywhere, fascinated by the strange alien who had pulled her from collapsed building. Will they kill us now? Pella asked simply. Jiho looked down at the child. He thought about lying, but Velaran could sense dishonesty through pheromones in the water. They'll try, he said, but we'll try to stop them. You're very small to stop so many ships, Pella observed. Jiho laughed, a sound that made the child flinch until she realized it wasn't aggression. Pella, let me tell you about Earth. Our world tried to kill us with ice ages that covered everything in frozen death. We survived. It tried to kill us with plagues that wiped out entire cities. We survived. It sent predators with teeth and claws, and we killed them and wore their skins. Being small doesn't matter. Giving up matters, and humans don't give up. Aboard the Resilience, Dr. Sun Hee-Bei studied reports from the medical teams. She was the ship's psychologist, and what she was seeing fascinated her. The Velaran were showing signs of severe trauma from just 5 days of warfare. They were having mental breakdowns, unable to process the violence. But this made sense. They had evolved on a world with almost no predators, no natural disasters, no violence at all. Peace was literally in their biology. Humans were different. Human soldiers were showing stress, certainly, but they were functional. They had mechanisms to cope with trauma that other species lacked, because humans came from Earth where trauma was daily life. We're built for this, Sun Hee said to Captain Hyunwoo. Not because we want to be, but because we had to be. Every human alive is descended from survivors of Earth's endless catastrophes. The ones who couldn't handle stress died out. We're the ones who remained. Hyunwoo looked at the psychological data. Does that make us better or worse? Neither, Sun Hee said. Just different. But in this situation, our difference is what's keeping the Velaran alive. Warlord Kethvar studied the human ships from his command vessel. He was massive, even for a Kraith, with armor that bore the marks of 100 conquered worlds. He had never lost a battle. The humans would not change that. They fight strangely, his tactical officer reported. They use methods we haven't seen in our databases. Boarding actions, ramming, psychological warfare. They seem to ignore conventional strategy. Kethvar made a dismissive gesture. Because they're primitive. We have overwhelming numbers and superior technology. Simple mathematics says we win. But Kethvar didn't understand humans. Mathematics assumed rational behavior. Humans were not rational. They were emotional, stubborn, and creative in ways that computer models couldn't predict. Engineer Min-Ho Choi had discovered something important. The Kraith fleet was coordinated by advanced AI systems. Every ship was networked together, sharing data and tactical decisions. It made them efficient and coordinated. It also made them predictable. I can break their network, Min-Ho told Admiral Seojun during an emergency command meeting. I've written a virus. If we can upload it to their flagship, it'll cascade through their entire fleet. Their ships will still work, but they'll be fighting individually instead of as a coordinated force. How do we upload it? Seojun asked. Min-Ho's expression was grim. Someone has to get physically close to their flagship. Close enough to bypass their firewalls. It's basically a suicide run. The bridge was silent. Everyone knew what Min-Ho was really saying. Someone had to fly directly into the heart of the enemy fleet with almost no chance of survival. I'll do it, Hyunwoo said immediately. No. Admiral Seojun's voice was firm. You're too valuable as a commander. I'll take a strike team and nobody's doing a suicide run. Lieutenant Daeun interrupted. Her face appeared on screen from her fighter. Not yet, anyway. Give me 2 days. Let me study their patrol patterns. Maybe I can find a way in that's only mostly suicidal. On the surface, the Kraith launched a massive ground assault. Hundreds of dropships descended on the coastal cities. The Velaran panicked, trying to flee into deeper waters. Private Jiho and the other human Marines formed a defensive line. The Kraith soldiers were tall and heavily armored. They moved with confidence, expecting easy victory. They had conquered dozens of species. These few hundred humans wouldn't slow them down. They were wrong. The humans had spent 5 days fortifying the city. They knew every street, every building, every hiding spot, and they had taught the Velaran to help them. When the Kraith advanced, they found themselves in a maze of ambushes and traps. Jiho fought with a rifle in his hands and Pela hiding behind him. He had promised to protect the child, and humans kept their promises. When a Kraith soldier got too close, Jiho charged forward with his combat knife. The fight was brutal and close. The Kraith was bigger and stronger, but Jiho was faster and desperate. He won, barely. You're bleeding, Pela said, frightened. Jiho looked down at the cut across his arm. It hurt, but he had worse. It's fine. Humans heal fast. That was true. Human healing rates were considered remarkable by galactic standards, another gift from their Deathworld evolution. The battle raged for hours. The Kraith kept expecting the human line to break. It didn't. Human Marines fought through injuries that would have killed any other species. They covered each other, adapted tactics on the fly, and absolutely refused to retreat. Dr. Jiwan worked in a makeshift hospital that was actively being shelled. She performed surgery while the building shook, treated wounded soldiers who tried to return immediately to combat, and saved Velaran civilians who were catatonic with fear. A Kraith shell hit nearby and part of the ceiling collapsed. Jiwan kept operating, her hands steady even as dust rained down. A Velaran nurse stared at her in disbelief. How are you so calm? The nurse asked. Jiwan didn't look up from the surgery. Because panicking won't save this patient. You do what needs to be done, even when you're terrified. That's how humans survive. By the end of the second day, something remarkable was happening. The Velaran were starting to fight back. Not with violence, they still couldn't bring themselves to that. But they were helping in other ways. They guided human soldiers through underwater passages. They used their knowledge of local ecology to create barriers. They rescued wounded humans with the same desperation humans had shown rescuing them. Pela had watched Jiho fight for 2 days. She had seen him bleed, seen him exhausted, seen him terrified, but she had never seen him quit. Something changed in the young Velaran. When Jiho was pinned down by Kraith fire, Pela did something her peaceful species had never done. She threw a rock at the enemy soldier, distracting him long enough for Jiho to take a shot. I helped, Pela said, surprised at herself. Jiho looked at the small child who had found courage she didn't know she had. Yes, you did. You're braver than you think. In orbit, Lieutenant Daeun had found her opening. The Kraith flagship followed a predictable patrol pattern, passing through a debris field every 6 hours. If she came in fast and low using the debris as cover, she might get close enough to upload the virus. She might also die. The odds were about 70-30 against survival. I'm ready, she told Captain Hyunwoo. Give me the virus. Hyunwoo looked at the young pilot on his screen. Daeun was brilliant, reckless, and absolutely determined. She reminded him of himself at that age before war had taught him caution. Come back alive, he ordered. That's not a request, Daeun smiled. I'll do my best, Captain. But if I don't make it, make sure Warlord Kethavar knows that a human pilot took down his precious flagship. She disconnected, loaded the virus into her fighter systems, and prepared for a flight that would either turn the tide of battle or end her life. Either way, humanity would show the galaxy what Deathworlders could do. Lieutenant Daeun Song sat in her fighter cockpit, watching the Kraith flagship through her sensors. The massive vessel was 3 kilometers long, covered in weapons, and surrounded by an escort of 50 smaller warships. Getting close to it should be impossible. She had done impossible things before. Resilience, this is Daeun. Beginning my approach. Captain Hyunwoo's voice came through her headset. Good luck, Lieutenant. The whole galaxy is counting on you. No pressure then, Daeun muttered. She pushed her fighter into the debris field, flying between chunks of destroyed stations and dead ships. The debris was dangerous, but it hit her from Kraith sensors. She was flying manually. No computer assistance because computers were predictable and she needed to be anything but. A piece of debris the size of a building came at her. Dunn rolled her fighter sideways, passing through a gap barely wider than her wings. Her heart raced, but her hands were steady. This was what she had trained for. This was what she was good at. On the Resilience, Captain Hyunwoo watched the battle unfold. The Kraith were pressing hard on all fronts. On the surface, human Marines were being overwhelmed by sheer numbers. In orbit, Admiral Seojin's fleet was taking heavy damage. They had held for 7 days, but everyone had limits, even humans, Captain. Minho said quietly. If Daeun's mission fails, we need a backup plan. Hyunwoo looked at his young engineer. You have something in mind? Minho pulled up a tactical display. The Resilience is fast and tough. If we loaded the virus into our main computer, you could ram the Kraith flagship directly. The impact would let us upload the virus through physical contact. That's suicide, Hyunwoo said flatly. Yes, sir. But it would work. We'd have time to evacuate most of the crew in escape pods. You'd need to stay to pilot the ship in, but everyone else could get out. Hyunwoo studied the young man. Minho was brilliant, but he was still naive in some ways. He thought in terms of numbers and probabilities, not the reality of watching people die. Let's hope Daeun succeeds, Hyunwoo said, but prepare the virus upload just in case. On the surface, Private Jiho-nam was running out of ammunition. He had been fighting for 7 days straight with almost no sleep. His body was covered in bruises and cuts. He had pulled 3 injured Marines to safety, killed more Kraith soldiers than he could count, and kept Pela alive through sheer stubborn determination. Now he was down to his last magazine and the Kraith were advancing in force. Pela, you need to run, Jiho said. Get into the deep water where they can't follow. The young Velarin looked at him with her large eyes. What about you? I'll hold them here as long as I can. Buy time for you and the others to escape. That's dying, Pela said simply. You're planning to die, Jiho smiled tiredly. Maybe, but you'll live. That's what matters. Pela did something that surprised the young Marine. She wrapped her small arms around him in an approximation of a human hug. Thank you for being brave for us. Then she ran, disappearing into the water with other Velarin civilians. Jiho watched her go, then turned back to face the advancing Kraith. He had 17 bullets left. He would make them count. Dr. Jiwon Park was performing surgery when the building shook from another impact. She was exhausted, running on stimulants and pure willpower. For 7 days she had worked non-stop, saving humans and Velarin alike. Her hands were steady, but she knew she was reaching her limits. A Velarin doctor approached her nervously. Dr. Park, we must evacuate. The Kraith will overrun this position within the hour. Jiwon looked at the patient on her table, a human Marine with catastrophic injuries. I can save him if I have 30 more minutes. You won't have 30 minutes. Please, we must go. Jiwon looked at the Velarin doctor, then at her patient. She had become a doctor to save lives. She couldn't stop now, not when someone needed her. You evacuate, Jiwon said calmly. I'll finish this surgery. If I don't make it out, tell my family I died doing what I loved. Lieutenant Daeun had reached the Kraith flagship. She was so close she could see individual hull plates. Alarm screamed in her cockpit as the flagship's weapons locked onto her. She had seconds to upload the virus before they destroyed her. Come on, she whispered, her fingers flying over controls. The upload bar crept forward slowly. Too slowly, a Kraith fighter appeared on her 6. She couldn't evade, not while maintaining the upload connection. Then Admiral Seojin's voice came through the communication system. All ships cover Daeun, whatever it takes. Human vessels threw themselves between Daeun and the Kraith weapons. They took hits meant for her, their shields failing, their hulls breaching. They died to buy her seconds. The upload bar reached 100%. Got it. Daeun screamed in triumph. She broke off, her fighter spinning through space as Kraith weapons fire filled the space where she had been. Something clipped her wing and her fighter started tumbling. She fought for control, managed to stabilize, but her engines were damaged. She was drifting, defenseless. On the Kraith flagship, Warlord Kethavar noticed something wrong. His ship's systems were freezing, lagging, failing. The virus was spreading through the Kraith network like wildfire. What's happening? He roared. The humans, his tactical officer gasped. They've infected our systems. The network is collapsing. Ships are losing coordination. Kethavar stared at his screens as his perfectly organized fleet descended into chaos. Ships were firing on their own forces, unable to identify friends from enemies. Formations broke apart. The Kraith Empire's greatest strength had become a weakness. Impossible, Kethvar whispered. They were outnumbered 40-1. Captain Hyunwoo saw the Kraith fleet fall into disarray and knew this was their chance. But Daeun's fighter was drifting, damaged and vulnerable. Kraith ships were moving to finish her off. Minho, how long to reach Daeun's position? Hyunwoo asked. 7 minutes at full speed. But Captain, there are 15 Kraith ships between us and her. Hyunwoo made his decision. Then we go through them. All power to forward shields. Ram anything in our way. The Resilience accelerated, a human ship doing what human ships did best, surviving impacts that should destroy them. They smashed through a Kraith destroyer, their shields holding. They scraped past a cruiser, tearing a gash in its hull. They reached Daeun and grabbed her fighter with a tractor beam. I've got you, Hyunwoo said. You did good, Lieutenant. Captain, Daeun's voice was weak. My cockpit is breached. I'm losing air. Hold on. We'll get you to medical. But even as he spoke, alarms blared. The Kraith had focused fire on the Resilience. Their shields were failing. Hull breaches on multiple decks, Captain, Minho said urgently. We need to retreat. The ship can't take much more. Hyunwoo looked at his screens. On the surface, Jiho and other Marines were making their last stand. Dr. Jiwon was still operating in a collapsing hospital. Admiral Seojin's fleet was scattered and damaged. They had hurt the Kraith badly, but not enough. Not yet. Minho, how long until the Kraith fleet recovers from the virus? Maybe an hour. Maybe less. Their AI systems are robust. Hyunwoo made a decision. Then we finish this now. Load the virus into our systems. We're going to ram the Kraith flagship. Captain, no. Jiwon's voice came through from the medical bay. She had been listening. If you do that, you die. If I don't, everyone dies, Hyunwoo said simply. Evacuate all non-essential personnel. Minho, you're leaving too. I'm staying, Minho said firmly. You'll need an engineer to keep the ship running long enough. That's an order, Minho. The young engineer looked at his captain. With respect, sir, no. You taught me that humans don't abandon each other. I'm not abandoning you. Hyunwoo wanted to argue, but there was no time. The Kraith were recovering. He opened a ship-wide channel. All hands, this is the captain. We're about to do something insane. Evacuate to the escape pods. That's an order. For those who stay, it's been an honor. Then he opened a channel to Earth. To everyone who would listen. This is Captain Hyunwoo Kim of the Resilience. If you're hearing this, we've probably failed. But we tried. We came when no one else would. We fought when everyone said we couldn't win. And maybe we didn't save everyone, but we saved some. That has to count for something. Remember the Velarin. Remember that we tried. Remember that humanity answers when innocents call for help. He aimed the Resilience at the Kraith flagship and pushed the engines to maximum. For Earth, he whispered. For the Velarin. For everyone who can't fight for themselves. The Resilience accelerated toward its final mission. The Resilience hit the Kraith flagship like a meteor hitting a planet. The collision was catastrophic, tearing through shields and armor. For a moment, both ships hung in space, locked together. Then the virus uploaded through the physical connection, flooding into the flagship systems faster than any firewall could stop it. Warlord Kethvar felt his ship die around him. Every system failed simultaneously. Life support, weapons, engines, communications. The virus had done what it was designed to do. It had killed the heart of the Kraith fleet, and it was spreading. Every ship connected to the network received the virus. Within minutes, 200 Kraith vessels went dark. On the Velarin surface, Private Jiho Nam was down to his last 3 bullets when he noticed something. The Kraith soldiers had stopped advancing. They stood confused, their weapons lowering, their communication systems dead. Without their network, they were lost. Jiho didn't waste the opportunity. Push forward! Now while they're disorganized. The human Marines, exhausted and wounded, found strength they didn't know they had. They advanced and the Kraith retreated. Without coordination, without orders, the invaders broke and ran. Pella emerged from the water, staring at the retreating enemy. You won? Jiho collapsed against a wall, sliding down to sit heavily. Maybe for now. Dr. Jiwon Park finished her surgery as the building stopped shaking. The Kraith bombardment had ended. She looked up, her hands still bloody, and saw Velarin doctors staring at her in awe. The fighting has stopped, one of them said. The Kraith are retreating. They're actually retreating. Jiwon allowed herself a moment of relief. Then she looked at the many wounded still waiting for treatment. Good. Now we can save the ones who remain. In orbit, Admiral Seojin watched escape pods launching from the Resilience in its final moments. Most of the crew had made it out, but sensors showed 2 life signs still aboard the dying ship. Captain Hyunwoo and Engineer Minho had stayed to the end, making sure everyone else escaped. "Get those pods recovered," Seojin ordered. Then quietly, "Hyunwoo, you stubborn fool, you actually did it." The Kraith fleet was in full retreat. Ships that could still move were fleeing the system. Those that couldn't were surrendering. In 1 week, 6 human ships had broken an empire that had conquered dozens of worlds. Lieutenant Daeun Song woke in the medical bay of Admiral Seojin's flagship. Her body ached and she could barely move, but she was alive. A nurse noticed her stirring. "Easy, Lieutenant. You took some hard hits, Captain Hyunwoo," Daeun asked. The nurse's expression answered the question before words did. The Resilience was destroyed. Most of the crew escaped, but the captain and Engineer Minho stayed aboard to guide it in. They didn't make it. Daeun closed her eyes. She had completed her mission. The virus had worked. They had won. But the cost was higher than she wanted to think about. 6 months passed. The galaxy changed in ways no one had predicted. The Kraith Empire collapsed without their coordinated fleet. Dozens of enslaved species rose up and reclaimed their freedom. The Galactic Assembly, embarrassed by their inaction, implemented new emergency response protocols. And Earth was no longer isolated. Ambassador Yuna Lee returned to the assembly chambers. The reaction was different now. Instead of fear, delegates showed respect. Some even showed guilt. "Ambassador Lee," the chairman said formally, "the assembly wishes to express its gratitude for humanity's actions at Velarin. Your people saved an entire species when we chose to do nothing." Yuna looked at the chairman coolly. "My people died because you chose to do nothing." Captain Hyunwoo Kim and Engineer Minho Choi gave their lives for people they had never met. Remember their names. Remember what we lost so you could keep your hands clean. The chamber was silent. Then one by one, delegates stood in respect. It was a gesture of honor, rare in the assembly. Yuna stood as well. Not for them, but for Hyunwoo and Minho and all the humans who had bled in a war that wasn't theirs. On the Velarin homeworld, Dr. Jiwon Park had stayed to help with reconstruction. She trained Velarin medical teams in emergency medicine, teaching them techniques that could save lives when time was critical. The Velarin learned quickly, though they found human medical practices brutal compared to their gentler methods. "You cut into bodies so readily," a Velarin doctor observed. "It seems violent." Jiwon smiled slightly. "Sometimes violence saves lives. You don't have to like it, but you have to accept it. The universe isn't always kind." She walked through the rebuilt coastal city where she had worked during the war. Buildings had been reconstructed, but memorials marked places where civilians had died. At one memorial, she found Private Jiho Nam sitting quietly. Jiho had survived the war, but like many soldiers, he carried invisible wounds. He jumped at loud noises. He had nightmares. The Velarin doctors didn't understand post-traumatic stress, but Dr. Jiwon did. She sat beside him. "How are you doing?" she asked. "I keep seeing them die," Jiho said quietly. "The ones I couldn't save. The Marines who covered me. Captain Hyunwoo, I survived and they didn't. That's not your fault. You did your duty. They did theirs. Does it get easier?" Jiho asked. Jiwon thought about all the wars she had seen, all the people she had lost. "No, but you learned to carry it. And you remember why they died. They died so people like Pela could live." As if summoned, the young Velarin appeared. She was larger now, growing fast as her species did. She saw Jiho and rushed over, wrapping her arms around the Marine. "Jiho!" Dr. Jiwon. "I was looking for you." Jiho managed a real smile. "Hey, Pela, what's wrong?" "Nothing is wrong. I wanted to show you something." She held out a drawing, crude but recognizable. It showed a human and a Velarin standing together. "I drew this for school. We had to draw our hero. I drew you." Jiho looked at the drawing, then at the child he had protected. Something in his chest loosened just a little. Maybe he did matter. Maybe his survival wasn't a mistake. On Earth, a memorial was being dedicated. It stood in the center of Geneva, where the United Earth government met. The memorial was a simple black wall with names engraved in gold. Every human who had died at Velarin was listed. At the top, in larger letters, Captain Hyunwoo Kim and Engineer Minho Choi. Ambassador Yuna spoke at the dedication. Beside her stood Admiral Seojin. now commander of humanity's rapidly expanding fleet. Representatives from dozens of alien species attended, including Talaran from the Velaran. They called for help, Una said, her voice carrying across the assembled crowd. The Velaran called into the void, not expecting an answer. But humanity answered. 6 ships against an empire. Impossible odds. And yet they went. Not because it was easy or safe or profitable, but because it was right. She paused, looking at the names on the wall. We come from a harsh world. A death world, as the galaxy calls it. And yes, that made us dangerous. But it also made us compassionate. We know suffering, so we fight to end it for others. We know loss, so we protect what remains. We know death, so we value life. Talaran stepped forward. The elderly Velaran moved slowly, but with dignity. Before humans came, my people were dying. We had given up hope. Then 6 ships arrived, filled with people who were strangers to us. They fought for us. They bled for us. Some died for us. The galaxy feared humans as Deathworlders, as violent primitives. But we know the truth. Humans are protectors. Humans are heroes. He placed a wreath at the base of the memorial. It was made of flowers from both Earth and Velaran, blue and white petals intertwined. We will never forget what you sacrificed for us. After the ceremony, Admiral Seojin found himself approached by Lieutenant Daeun. She saluted crisply. Admiral, I have a request. Speak freely, Lieutenant. I want to name my new command after Captain Hyunwoo. The UES Hyunwoo Kim. I want his name to fly among the stars. Seojin smiled. Approved. And Lieutenant? Your first mission will be an exploration run beyond known space. New systems, new species. Maybe someone else out there needs help. Daeun saluted again, but she was smiling. I'll be ready, sir. Whenever they call, we'll answer. In the weeks and months that followed, that became humanity's reputation. Other species came to Earth seeking alliances, asking for help with their own problems. Some requests were legitimate. Others tried to use human violence for selfish ends. Ambassador Una was careful about which calls they answered. Not every problem needed a military solution. Not every conflict required human intervention. But when innocents were threatened, when peaceful species faced extinction, when the powerful preyed on the weak, humanity responded. They became known across the galaxy as the Deathworld Protectors. Species that had once feared them now sought their friendship. Children of a dozen different species grew up hearing stories about the humans who came when no one else would. On the Velaran homeworld, a new generation was growing up. They learned about the war, about the humans who saved them, about Captain Hyunwoo's sacrifice. They were still a peaceful species, but they understood now that peace sometimes required others to fight for it. Pella, now older and studying to be a teacher, would tell her own students about the young human Marine who had protected her, about how he had been terrified but fought anyway, about how he had been wounded but never quit, about how humans were proof that you didn't have to be perfect to be good. Dr. Jiwon eventually returned to Earth, but she carried the Velaran with her in her heart.